Steve gave us a lot of information, jam-packed, and I just hope Dean doesn't require us to take a quiz before we get our lunch later on the content of Steve's presentation. A lot of good information there. I'm Butch Kirby. I'm here today primarily as the chair of GPAS, one of the entities that we just talked about there. Multi-jurisdictional, urbanized area, Greenville, Pickens, Anderson area, a little bit of Spartanburg, and it's called an MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, as far as what federal guidelines are, excuse me for that. And there are MPOs all across the state. But I'm going to introduce our speaker here in just a minute. I was thinking about what was said earlier about, about the traffic on I-85 and 385. So I've done a little study on League Road, which is a small county road that I happen to live on in Greenville County. For many years, we had about one car came down the road about every 30 minutes. Now it's one vehicle every 30 seconds. And many of you experience the same thing. I've actually thought about the possibility of getting a traffic signal at the end of my driveway. I don't think that's going to ever happen. But going back to the slide we saw earlier when Dean was presenting about doing the same thing over and over again, nobody in here is crazy. We've got to do something different. And I think we can. We can't stop growing. Some people say, well, we got to quit growing. No, we're not going to stop growing. We're going to continue to grow. We've got a vibrant economy here and people coming in and diverse population, all those good things that come along with growth. But we do have to address the downside to growth. We're going to have to look at new ways to grow and to provide infrastructure for that growth in such a way that it's economical and efficient. And there are ideas out there that you're going to be hearing about today and in the near future that'll give us some ideas on what we can coalesce around to make those changes to grow in such a way that we retain our quality of life and become more efficient about the things we do and make this a great place to continue for all of our families and children, grandchildren to grow up in. I had this original time slot to talk about funding, and I thought about that. I heard Christy Hall, our Secretary of Transportation, give a presentation a few weeks ago, really, at an ACOG board meeting, and I said, that's the information we need for this group here today. So I did what all good leaders do. I contacted somebody that knows more about it than I do to come in and fill this time slot. I said, I'd introduce them. Well, Christy really wanted to be here. She couldn't be here today, but we have with us Brian Key. Brian, come up, please. Brian is the Deputy Secretary of the DOT for Finance and Administration. He's a lifelong resident of Columbia, South Carolina, born and raised. He's a proud Gamecock graduate of the University of South Carolina. He's a professional engineer, and he's been with DOT throughout his career. Actually started with DOT while he was in school at the University of South Carolina. So thank you for being with us this morning.
Again, the Secretary wishes she could be here this morning. She really wanted to be a part of this Upstate presentation. She asked me to come up and give it. She's with some CTCs today. She's doing another involvement presentation. We're going to talk to all the CTCs in the state, and she's kicking that off today. Steve gave a great introduction to all the pieces and how they work together, and what I hope to get through in just a few minutes is what's important and maybe what happened this last year in the 2017 legislative session and how we propose to move forward with that at the Department of Transportation. It's no secret that South Carolina, I'm talking on a state level now, leads the nation in fatalities, something you don't want to lead in anything at. We have 750 structurally deficient bridges in the state, and 80% of our pavements are in need of repair statewide. That's an $11 billion problem. And as Steve talked about, there's a number of widenings and projects that are past due. The system that DOT maintains in South Carolina, hopefully most of you know, is the 4th largest state-maintained transportation system in the nation. And that's hard to grapple with when you look at the size of South Carolina compared to so many states out there. But let me hit you with something else. We have 41,000 miles that we maintain in the state of South Carolina. 20,000 of those are what we call local roads or neighborhood streets. They're the old city roads that crisscross in the pattern, the square pattern block. They're subdivisions that were built and came into the state system through the development of the state system. But if you just got rid of that part of the system, which is 20,000 miles that we're responsible for, we would still have a system that's larger than 42 other states maintain. That's cutting our mileage in half, and it would still be in the top 10 of state-maintained transportation systems in the nation. And so you combine all that together with what we've been tasked with and where our funding is, and you can see where the problems have arisen in South Carolina over the years, how our system's gotten such a condition. With the roads bill that was passed this year, Secretary of Transportation worked with our state legislature and focusing on these 4 areas. First of all, and the most important to us is safety, improving our bridges, pavements, and widenings. Prior to the legislation that was passed this year, we did get some improvements in funding, but it was directed specifically at certain items of transportation. The Department of Transportation really didn't have a lot of say-so in how it was spent. It was supposed to go towards pavement, it was supposed to go towards bridges. Some of that funding came from DMV fees and fines, and some of them came from the sale of motor vehicles in the state. And our priorities were, at that time, to jumpstart some of the interstate projects, which you see right here in the Upstate that have already begun. Increasing our resurfacing program, and we began the launch of our significant bridge program, and it was just the improvement of that. Hopefully you know with the legislative session, the legislature passed a 12-cent increase on the gas tax over the next 6 years, and it's supposed to jump 2 cents a year for the next 6 years, which ultimately will give us roughly $600 million in additional transportation funding. I jumped to this slide because it gives you what we're supposed, or how we propose to utilize those funds over that period right there. And you'll see the biggest piece is the gray at the bottom, which is resurfacing, maintaining our system. I think it's been a little bit of myth that people talk about what does DOT do with their money, and I'll show you just a little bit. And everybody talks, well, they widen roads. Well, we do some of that, but there are a lot of other people who play an important piece in that. And I hope to show you that the vast majority of our budget goes to maintaining our system. And as much as we were doing that, we were falling woefully short in our ability to keep up with it. The last major increase in funding that the department saw prior to the previous 2 years was in 1987, which was the year after I came to DOT. That's a really, really long time. I'm going to skip a couple slides because a lot of what I have here is too long for the allotment that was given. But what you'll see is the DOT's budget is presently right now at $2.5 billion. And that seems like a very, very big number. But when you allocate that over the state and with the cost of projects, it really, it's beginning to go a longer ways. This is the budget that we asked for with the new gas tax increase. It'll be 4 cents by the time we get to 18-19. And you'll see that we've planned for $2.4 billion in expenditures during that period. So what makes up our revenue at DOT? The biggest part of our revenue, or 42%, is our federal aid reimbursements. And Steve talked a little bit about that. But in order to get that, it comes with strings, and it falls within specified buckets. And the Federal Highway Administration says you have to do certain pieces with it and hit certain targets. For our 18-19 year, that'll go over $1 billion is what we expect. But in order to get that $1 billion, you've got to match that. It takes a 20% match to get that $1 billion back in South Carolina, so that's $200 billion. So you see the next piece, which is our state motor user fee. or 20% of that, and the great majority of that goes to getting the federal money, yours and my gas tax, that goes to Washington back into South Carolina. The 14% that you see right there is the new piece that the legislature provided for the Department of Transportation, and that is the Infrastructure Maintenance Trust Fund. Now, the reason why they call it that is because it sort of came with strings on it also, and it is to be used for the improvement of the existing system that we have. Say that again, the improvement of the existing system. Pavements, bridges, and maintenance of the existing system that we have. You'll see the 7% of our budget is made up of fines, fees, and tolls, and participation agreements where we participate with other people. You see our non-federal aid program, which are the roads in South Carolina that don't qualify for federal aid funds, which is part of the money we got in 16 and 17. You see our general funds that we get from SCDOT is only $57,000, which is vastly different from other states. DOT is funded solely by the gas tax. The gas tax goes into a trust fund at the Treasury Department, and as DOT calls upon it, they pay the bills. The money doesn't come into DOT for us to pay the bills. We send a copy of the bills that need to be paid to the Treasury. The Treasury pays it straight from the gas tax. In many other states, in addition to the gas tax, they get apportionment from their General Assembly. And the last piece you'll see, and sometimes it's the most misunderstood piece, is other state agency funds. There are other state agencies, mainly right now, the Port and Department of Commerce, that have entered into large contracts with the Department of Transportation. That's 15% of the budget, and the reason why that's confusing sometimes is people see DOT's budget kind of growing sort of outside of what the gas tax provides us, and they say, well, DOT, you get more money, what are you doing with it? Well, we're participating with the Ports Authority on a very big project to build the Port Access Road down in Charleston, which is a designated facility coming off 26 that goes directly into the port. And then the Volvo interchange with the Department of Commerce. And what happens is when we participate with somebody, the state law says we've got to have the revenue before we can expend it. So those agencies have conveyed to us this year 15% of our budget. The reason why it's so big is both of those projects are now in the construction phase, and they're going to draw on large sums of money as they go into the construction. So how are we going to use that? 48% of our budget goes to maintenance and system preservation. Now, when we build a new bridge, if we don't put capacity on that bridge, it's a two-lane bridge. When we're done with it, if it's 2 lanes, it may be wider because we put improved shoulders, we've improved the standards on it, but if the capacity is the same, that's a maintenance project. That's like fixing the roof on your house. It's only a capacity project if you add square footage to your house, if you add lanes. Now, we do that with intersection projects, and some of the widening projects we participate with the NPO, but you see those are only 36% of our budget. Now, we've got some pretty big projects out there. Adding capacity is 85-385 project that is here in Spartanburg. We're doing some interstate work in Columbia, and those are really big projects. But I hope to convey to you that the vast majority of our budget goes to maintaining, resurfacing, taking down old bridges, putting up new bridges, and maintaining our existing system. And you see the other elements up there, such as administration, loans that we have to pay, and some other things that are in there. I'll go over just this piece. Our federal aid, pavement, rehabilitation, and resurfacing is $550 million. And we're going to add, ultimately, $400 million to that. And I'm going to show you what that's going to do in just a second. I've already talked about these pieces. I think the greatest thing that the Secretary of Transportation did is the first time the Department of Transportation has ever had a 10-year program. In my 30 years, we've done some 2 years and some 3 years and some 5 years, but the Secretary came up with a 10-year plan. And so with the gas tax increase, what is that going to get us? Well, it's going to get 1,000 miles of rural road safety projects. It's going to get 465 new bridges. It's going to reverse the trend of deteriorating pavements in South Carolina and 140 miles of interstate widening. Now, why is that important? Why have I given you the very details of what we want to do? Well, one reason is so we can grade ourselves, how we're doing. And I think that was very important to the legislature for us to define those parameters, because they saw fit to support the plan that the Secretary laid out, and they had some input in how that plan was developed, and we had some targets, and you'll see these targets right here. Let's talk about our resurfacing plan. You'll see the prior years over to the left and the system condition at this point. 65% of our interstate pavements are what's called good condition today. 23% of our major roads, SC routes and federal aid primary routes, only 23% of those are labeled in good condition. I don't know where else you could go except for baseball and bat 333 and be a legend in baseball. But anything else you do, if you're at 23%, you're not doing very well. And you can see our farm to market roads are a little bit lower, and our neighborhood streets are lower than that. But what you see on the right are the targets, the 10-year targets that the Secretary wants to hit, and the amount of funding that comes with that in order to hit these targets. And so that's the plan right there. So for the next 10 years, we've got a roadmap. We can grade ourselves on an annual basis, how we're getting on that roadmap, and we hope to be able to show what we're doing with that information. So how that fits into our plans, we have some performance targets, and Steve taught about MAP 21 and the FAST Act. Both of those initiatives were legislated by Congress, and that's where the federal money goes, and we have to respond to them similar to a report card basis on how we're meeting the targets that we've established by ourselves in our long-range plan. Our focus on urban safety improvements as well as interstate mobility. It's going to take more than just the pieces that I've shown you in order to accomplish some of the goals that we've set out. Let's see. This is the funding distribution. Steve talked just a little bit about how the funding distribution goes. These are COGS and MPOs, and how the funding is to be appropriated to those. I don't know whether that must be over the whole 10-year period. Is that correct?
That's per year.
Those are the annual allocations.
That's per year, but about half of it, that's
Yes, okay. For all those programs, for each of your programs?
I can really only speak now.
Okay. Well, as Steve alluded to, some of that goes into debt service on projects that we're already doing, and some of it is to go to the new projects. Some of the counties in South Carolina have saw fit amongst themselves to vote to share some of that burden. 17 counties in South Carolina have some sort of local program in which they're utilizing revenues within their county boundaries to support additional transportation projects within their county. A lot of that is being spent on the state-maintained system, and they, of course, they have a lot of input. So it's very confusing sometimes to see somebody doing work on a roadway in South Carolina. I think the general consensus is that's the Department of Transportation doing. There is a lot of different groups participating in transportation projects in South Carolina. County transportation committees. They were integral and received some of the funding that the General Assembly appropriated to transportation improvements. And why are they important? The CTCs are a local way. There's 46 CTCs in South Carolina. CTC is a county transportation committee. And they're allocated specific monies statewide, and they plan locally on where those monies go. Generally, those monies have been spent primarily on the secondary systems and the local roads, and the Secretary is going out and meeting with them to talk about how important that is that they stay the focus, because the Department of Transportation is focusing most of those efforts on the interstate system and the primary systems in South Carolina. Now, what does that mean for the upstate? Well, we're going to double the resurfacing across the state. And so you saw that with the great increase. 132 bridges in the upstate area are programmed to be replaced with the gas tax funds. 85 from the North Carolina state line to 19 miles to that last exit at Clemson will be totally widened, or I think some of it are 3 lanes and actually going to 4 lanes. But the biggest projects are the section you see from 26 on up to the state line of 2-lane to 3-lane widening for that section. And lastly, but most importantly, there are 12 deadly corridors identified in the upstate that we propose to put additional safety features on those roads, which may include a combined resurfacing or widening shoulders or clearing out behind the ditches. The number one fatality in South Carolina is fixed object crashes. Generally, somebody runs off the road in a particular area, whether that's a curve or something else, and strikes something off the side of the road. Unfortunately, some of that can be attributed to the condition of the road. It might not have been something that caused it directly in the road. It might have been something, a function of the road itself. And so all of these funding efforts go to improve those corridors as well. Well, how do you find out about what we're doing? We've instituted a new public portal which talks about our projects, and a lot of this can actually be run on the app. The picture down at the right is a picture of Columbia, but you can bring up from our website actual projects and what's going on, and click on those individual roads and see whether it's a safety project, a resurfacing project, and when you would expect that to happen. I don't know about my time, but I think I'm pretty good.
Did you say anything about mass transit plan?
Well, no, I don't think we've focused on the safety and improved mobility with that. And so there's not an increased mass transit with that. Generally, most of the funds that go with mass transit come through the federal piece, and would be subject to any increases in that federal piece. Thank you.